We're here, everybody. We made it to the last video for the week, but also one of the most versatile classes in the game. My name is Winback. This is the Newcomer's Guide to Grim Dawn, and we'll be talking about the Necromancer today. The Necro is a summoning tanky mage with a damage focus on vitality, cold, and poison damage with a minor in ether. Don't forget, though, this is a YouTube video, so feel free to raise that like button from the dead, summon a comment from the depths, or subscribe with the bones from the big empty grave behind your house. Let's get started. Now, our first active ability is a little bit wonky, but can be used as a channel similar to Aether Ray and Ignifar. Flames of Ignifar, that is. The big difference is that the ability that we have here only hits one person at a time. Drain Essence is going to be dealing Aether and Vitality Decay damage, and then the more attractive a part of the ability, however, is the Converted to Health from Attack portion. Essentially, you get a Vampire Beam. Grave Chill is the first modifier on the path and will modify the damage in total by 25% while slowing target movement and converting the Aether damage by 100% into cold damage. It's only a 1-point modification, so if you're rocking a cold build, I would highly recommend this one. And then the next mastery for this ability is called Hungering Reach. It'll give the ability to bounce the beam to other targets. It is a % chance to do so. Unfortunately, it doesn't just automatically bounce, it's making it an AoE ability, which is a little bit unfortunate, but we do also increase the crit damage and add on more attack converted to health. So the Vampire Beam definitely gets more vampire and a little less beam. Decomposition is the last of the masteries for the ability, though, and it's going to add on some flat vitality damage, buff our vitality decay damage, and reduce our target's offensive ability. This ability is a little bit all over the place, but I think the effect is really cool looking, so I've been trying to work out a build for it. Maybe I'll share that video one day, but we are still cooking for now with this bad boy. Next up is Bone Harvest. This ability is an AoE wave of bones and is the cornerstone of wave clearing builds for the Necromancer. Bone Harvest does your weapon damage, flat piercing damage, cold damage, and vitality damage, and it's also going to slow enemies by a percentage. Harvester of Death is the first modifier and does require a two-handed weapon, and it's also going to force us to lose a bit of range on our wave, but for trading that, we get a total damage modification of 20% and all of our physical damage converted to cold. Dread is the next mastery, and this is going to further increase the range of the ability, which is great if you took Harvester of Death. We're also going to get a added flat vitality decay stat. We're going to buff the piercing, cold, and vitality damage as well. And there's also a small chance to terrify the targets that we hit, so at this point we deal boats of damage with slows and scares. Even with that, there is yet another mastery to this ability called Soul Harvest. The last on the list is going to add cold with vitality damage, buff your cold, vitality, and vitality decay damage, and for all you pet builders out there, we get a flat vitality damage added to our pets as well with a buff to all of their damage on top of that. All you have to do is cast this ability, and since it's a 5-second duration on that buff and the ability is only a 3-second cooldown, we pretty much have this buff up permanently. So cast lots of bones, gets lots of buffs, and make your pets happier that they're on your team. The next active on the list is a 1-button no mastery active called Ill Omen. This is an AoE ability around the Necromancer in a very short radius, but it is going to be dealing flat cold damage, vitality decay damage while confusing the target, reducing their damage, and reducing their movement speed. So, overall, it's not going to slow them per chance, it's just going to reduce their total amount of move speed. Which sounds like the same thing, but I don't think you can have a resistance to the reduction of your move speed. Lots of stuff packed into one button, so don't overlook it because it is pretty cool, but it is kind of difficult to see happening at the same time. Ravenous Earth is a huge AoE poison volcano and has 2 masteries of its own. Ravenous Earth is actually going to erupt and spew fragments that deal flat vitality and poison damage, but the number of fragments it launches depends on the level of the ability. The first mastery is called Decay, and it will be buffing the damage types we start with in our vitality and poison damage, while also reducing enemy damage. Foul Eruption is the last mastery, and it is going to add on some flat vitality and ether damage with a % reduction to the enemy's health. Add to that we are reducing targets' resistances, and you can see just how big an AoE bomb this ability can become. So if you're looking for more AoE but you're not looking at a giant green earthen butthole, you can take up Siphon Souls. Siphon Souls is the next active ability, and it's going to be dealing flat vitality damage in a very large AoE around your character. This ability also converts the damage to health while decreasing enemy health regeneration. Siphon Souls is an extremely strong ability, and when combined with the first mastery, Seer Souls, we actually extend the duration of the health regen reduction by quite a bit. Total damage modified is going to drop by 10%, but we also transfer all of our vitality damage into Aether damage. So it's another mastery that depends on the damage types that you build for it, but it does come with some very strong upsides too. Blood Boil is the last mastery for Siphon Souls and will add bleeding damage and vitality damage on top of reducing the enemy offensive ability by a huge amount, meaning that this ability is perfect for any melee class. Call of the Grave is the next active ability and is the first of the last two non-mastery active abilities in our kit. Call of the Grave is a single button press that will give you buffed crit damage, acid, vitality, poison, and vitality decay damage. With your character buffed, you'll also buff your pets with bonuses to all damage and crit damage, as well as everything that you get as a character. All things considered, this is a huge buff to your pets, but it only lasts for 10 seconds, and the cooldown on the ability is 24 seconds. So you'll want to make sure that you're timing it appropriately for the big damage. If your pets are all dead, probably don't push this button. Our very last active ability for the Necromancer is called Mark of Torment, and is everything I've ever needed for a tank melee class, which is almost exclusively what I use it for. Mark of Torment requires that you select an enemy, but while selected, you'll be absorbing damage up to a 50% at max rank. While you're absorbing this damage, you'll be reflecting it onto the target you've chosen up to 300%. So not only are we saving ourselves from damage, we're dishing it out to the heavy hitters as well. Because this ability has a very large cooldown, I'd recommend saving it for large hero enemies or bosses to get maximum efficiency out of it, but it is a very good defensive skill, and if you need to stay alive, whip it out. I'm sure it can do a bit of good for you. The other cool thing about this ability is that it works on a tether. So if you're a melee class, you're going to stay tethered to the person that is being reflected the damage at. So if you're ranged, I wouldn't say that this is a great ability for you, but at the same time, I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. What Necromancer would be complete without the ability to summon an army of the dead, though? Our first summon ability with the Necromancer is called Raise Skeletons. This ability is very special in how it behaves, but does exactly how the title would lead you to expect it does. Firstly, you've got a 3 summon limit, but the ability will raise 3 skeletons immediately. Skeletons are pretty squishy as far as summons go, but they are dealing physical and vitality damage. And when I say that the ability behaves in a special way, I mean that you can summon 4 different kinds of skeletons depending on the level of your ability. Skeletal Warriors are your standard naked skeletons with sticks, and are the most common skeletons to summon in the early levels. Skeletal Archers are the next type, and obviously are just naked skeletons with bows. Skeletal Arcanists are the next tier, and are the first clothed skeletons with magic, and they do have AoE magic abilities. The final skeleton summon is the Skeletal Revenant, though, and these are humongous skeletons clad in armor with shields, big skeleton tank boys. The more points you put into this ability, the more even the chance becomes for summoning one of the 4 types. At max rank, your highest chance to raise archers, at max rank, the chance to summon all 4 of these goes as such. So the chance to raise Archers and Arcanists is equal. So both of those will likely become the most common of your summons. The lowest chance summon that you have are the Revenants, which are the tanks, the big guys. And then your most common summon will still be the Skeletal Warrior. So all that being said, you should have a much higher chance to summon the bigger skeletons rather than just the warriors, but the more points that you get, the better. If you manage to get a ton of additional gear points into this ability, it'll actually flip-flop, and you'll have the lowest chance to summon Skeletal Warriors. Revenants will be the next lowest, and then you'll have the highest chance to summon Skeletal Arcanists with a slightly lower chance to summon Archers. So when you have this ability 100% maxed out in points, you'll get more Arcanists than anything else, and then Archers shortly followed behind. Because they're ranged classes, because they're doing a lot of ranged AoE from behind you, potentially, it does seem like the game wants you to have more. Now that the dissertation for the base ability is done, we can talk about Undead Legion, the first mastery. Undead Legion is going to reduce cooldown and increase our summon limit up to 5 at the maximum rank for the ability. Since our summon limit starts at 3, we can get 8 in total with just this mastery maxed out. Undead Legion also reduces the energy cost of this ability because sometimes all your skeletons are going to die in a big area of effect all at once, and you'll need to spam summon them back, so that energy reduction is really helpful. Will of the Crypt is going to be the next mastery for our raise skeletons, and is going to give the summons more flat vitality damage, and it's also going to buff their vitality damage as well as elemental damage. So on top of that, we're going to get increased armor, and we're going to get them some vitality resistance too, making some good defensive stats. But if you're playing an Arcanist Necromancer, which is called a Spellbinder, you can see the synergy between Escandra's Elemental Exchange and your Will of the Crypt. They two actually work very good together, so a whole bunch of skeletal mages dealing elemental damage and coating the ground in fire and doom is actually really cool. Who would have guessed? Our next summon is called Blightfiend and is just as gross as it sounds. Blightfiend is a thick boy made of meat who will be dealing physical and poison damage and has an AoE ability to deal acid and poison damage as well. If only one meaty man isn't enough for you, pick up Unstable Anomaly. This mastery will reduce the cooldown, add 2 to the summon limit while reducing the energy cost. The only downside to this mastery is that instead of living forever, the triple Blightfiends only live for 12 seconds. Rotting Fumes is the next mastery for this summon and adds a radius of poison damage, generates additional threat, reduces defensive ability, and while finally giving a chance to silence and blind enemies. So in essence, your Super Meat Boy becomes so stanky that everything gets blinded, stops casting, and dies. Blight Burst is your last mastery and is going to give the Fiend an ability to further explode with stank. The Blight Burst will pop in a huge radius, dealing a small portion of basic attack pet damage, while using acid, vitality, and poison damage as well. This ability will continue to generate additional threat, making him taunt enemies more, and confuse targets for 2 seconds. So if you take that back a couple paragraphs, we can use Ill Omen and the Blightfiend with the Blight Burst ability and really start confusing enemies. Moving on to your final summon for the Necromancer, we have the Reap Spirit. The second coolest base summon in the game, the Reap Spirit actually has 2 components in its summon. The first is an active component in which you will launch the spirit at an enemy, dealing weapon damage, ether damage, and vitality decay. And once this happens, the summon will appear, and on its own will deal cold and vitality damage. You can only ever summon one of these guys, and there are no masteries, but I would still say this ability is super worth it if the damage types are what you are looking for. Now, passively speaking, the Necromancer has a chunk of solid options, starting with Reaping Strike. This has a chance to activate off of normal attacks and will use weapon damage, flat vitality, aether damage as well, and convert part of that damage to health. Just as an added bonus, this ability will also provide Energy Leech, so there is even more synergy with our Nightblade and Arcanist classes. Passive number 2 is called Necrotic Edge and also has a % chance to be used. This actually activates in a 180-degree arc, so it can hit multiple people, dealing weapon damage, cold damage, vitality decay, and has a 30% chance to confused targets hit. So, there's a lot of confusion going on in this class. If you really had to find something to dig into that stat with, I think you have struck gold. If I had to strike a line, though, I would call this your Nightblade passive, while Reaping Strike would be your more Arcanist-focused melee passive. But that's a very generalized way of looking at things, so don't feel like those are the only classes that couple with these abilities. Spectral Binding is the next passive that we have got, and it will be active in an aura. The aura is going to add flat Aether damage while buffing Aether damage as well, and you'll also get added health and offensive ability. Add on the Spectral Wrath Mastery, and you'll get additional Aether damage, vitality damage, and start reducing attack speed of the enemies in the aura as well. With that, we also reduce physical, vitality, and Aether resistance, making us a walking resistance shredder. With my Reaper build, I actually use this AoE passive along with the Nightblade's Night's Chill passive, and a lot of the damage that I'm doing in a big AoE passively is cold and Aether focused, so it's really quite good. But all that being said, we're approaching the end of the Necromancer's passives with 2 exclusives. So the first is called Harbinger of Souls, and will be providing a flat vitality damage, vitality decay damage, and converting attack damage to health. That's also going to be buffing vitality, Aether, and vitality decay damage. And a small portion of your physical damage is also going to convert into vitality damage while increasing your attack and casting speed. It is a pure stat machine, this ability, but I don't think it requires a whole lot more for me to sell it. Honestly, if you just wanted to compare it to something like the Stormcallers or the Starcallers Pact for the Shamans and the Arcanist classes, you wouldn't be terribly far off. It's pretty good, but it's not necessarily exciting. Now, the last passive that we have is called Master of Death. This passive is going to affect both you and your pets, so as a player, you'll get flat defensive ability, but also a percentage increase to your offensive ability. So you'll get just kind of baseline better defenses, but the more offensive ability that you have, the more that this passive is going to buff that, making it easier for you to hit enemies. You get vitality resistance as well, so again, since it's a resistance, it's never a bad thing to have. And then the bonuses to the pets are the real shining staple for this ability, though. So we start with a bonus to all damage for your pets. We get buffed acid, vitality, and poison damage as well. And then we're going to go on to convert their physical damage to vitality damage while giving them a percentage increase to offensive ability as well. We tack on some vitality resistance for those guys too, and the stats really just kind of mirror from there. Long story short, this ability is built to make your pets hit hard and keep you alive so your pets can continue to deal monstrous amounts of damage while you run in circles and watch them eat everything in the room. That is it for the Necromancer, though, everybody. That is going to do it. This class is, again, one of the most versatile in the entire game, and I can 100% recommend it. My Reaper character is actually... Well, the Reaper is the Nightblade and the Necromancer, and it's one of the most fun experiences that I've had in this entire game. I built the class thinking I was just going to use AoE auras, and it really kind of developed even further into this soul-sucking AoE Aether Vitality monster. So I would highly, highly, highly recommend it, and it is extremely tanky. It's the only other class that I have to level 100 right now, so it is... well, I won't say only other. I think I have at least 3 classes at level 100, but I'll be honest with you, once they hit 100, I like to focus on making new characters, which is that's fine, you know. Everybody has their thing. Get to level 100, see if that's for you, but take a Reaper there if you are looking to have some fun. That is it for this video, and that is it for this week. We will be back next week to finish up the class portion of the Newcomer's Guide with the Oathkeeper, and then from there, we'll lock this game down, finish everybody off, and then call it a day. But thanks so much for hanging out. Peace out, everybody. I'll see you later.